Please be seated. In this time of rising anti-Semitism all around, we are in need of a story with a little bit of hope. And this morning, we have that here in our community. Our beloved member, Ruth Tepper, who has taught so many of our children years ago, had a wonderful relationship that you are going to hear about with a young German woman, Brit Kammler, who is here today. And she is now a vicar, soon to be minister of her own church. And they've come here to share their story of friendship with each of us and what we can learn from it. Please, Ruth and Brit.
Thank you, Rabbi Robinson. Shabbat Shalom. Have you ever done something a bit crazy and in the end glad you did it? I, along with my family, did. In 2014, we had a 19-year-old German girl named Brit come live with us when she came to volunteer with an organization in English called Action Reconciliation Service for Peace. It is a German peace organization founded in 1958 to confront the legacy of Nazis. It was prompted by the acknowledgement of guilt that Germans needed to face at the end of World War II and the Nazi era. ARSP is known for its international volunteer program, where approximately 180 18 to 27-year-olds are sent to countries that suffered under the Nazis, most in Europe, along with Israel and the United States, where there were and are Holocaust survivors. The goal, timely then and timely now, knowing that the consequences of Nazism are still being felt and that sadly they can never be truly overcome, ARSP stands for Understanding Between Generations, Cultures, Religions, which it strives to do through intensive dialogue. At the beginning of the organization, volunteers built and rebuilt synagogues and buildings destroyed during the war. It has since evolved into building the memorials to the Holocaust at Auschwitz and Theresienstadt, working at museums like the Anne Frank House and Yad Vashem. Today, volunteers, they work with elderly survivors of the Holocaust, along with groups of disabled individuals and refugees. In the United States, they work at the Holocaust Museum, American Jewish Committee, Jewish Elderly Housing, and nursing homes. In Boston, the volunteers work at Hebrew Senior Life Properties, and the model is that they live with a family. In 2014, Rabbi Sarah Pasha Orla, director of the program, put out a call for housing. We said yes reluctantly, and agreed that we would do it until another family was found. Taking in a 19-year-old stranger is a bit overwhelming. I am the granddaughter, niece, and cousin of family killed at Auschwitz. How would we be able to live together, and how would we talk about the past? I should have realized that these volunteers are a pretty self-selecting group of young people. Only a smart, mature, inquisitive, and caring person would take this on. Also talented, she juggles. By the end of October that year, when Brit was supposed to go to the new family, we realized that we had made ein großer Fehler, a big mistake. I put on a brave face, assured that we would meet weekly and keep up our connection. Lucky for us, she didn't want to go to the other family. And we didn't want her to go. She lived with us for a year, learning about Americans and Jews. She shared Shabbat dinners and holidays with us and our friends. Her parents came for Seder. She was sad to hear that there was no Shabbat alive last week or this week while she was here. We sat together that year discussing so much. We reassured her that she would do okay when faced with a group of elderly Holocaust survivors. When we faced an extremely difficult time during COVID, it was Brit's mother who reached out in a letter to me that I will always cherish. We have maintained our relationship with calls, Skype, here in the US and abroad. Today, when once again Jews around the world are vulnerable, Brit's commitment to educating her community about the horrors of anti-Semitism is a bright spot in a very dark world. I guess you could say it was b'shert that this Holocaust-related family was meant to open her home and hearts to a young woman who was willing to wrestle with her country's actions. Our family is looking forward to going to Germany next year. Friends ask, really? You're going to Germany? My answer is a resounding yeah. To hear Brit, now a Lutheran minister, give sermons in her church and attend her wedding. I will also go to Berlin and Frankfurt, where my mother spent the first 10 years of her life, and see where she lived and visit the cemetery where our relatives are buried. And I know that my mother would be proud of all we have done. If I, the granddaughter, niece, and cousin of a family lost in the Holocaust, could put aside my hesitations to sit face to face with Germans, I think all of us can start by sitting with the other, whoever is that other in your life, by opening up, listening, and sharing. Only then will this broken world get repaired. It starts with us. Es beginnt bei uns.
I came to Boston at the age of 18. Everything was new. My English was not good at all, and I had never met a Jewish person before. So it was all kind of overwhelming. I started working at Hebrew Rehab Center as part of the life enhancement team. I would play word games, do bingo with a 107-year-old, or would accompany the residents at Shabbat services every Friday afternoon. After a couple of months, I could sing the Hebrew prayers by heart. Some of the residents were Holocaust survivors, and during my one-on-one visits, they would share their stories with me. One of the survivors was Eva, a woman that had to flee from Poland. She would always be so nice to me, give me a kiss on my cheek, and thank me for my visits. She could speak a little German. One afternoon, we were sitting outside in the sun. She started praying a goodnight prayer that her parents had taught her. Müde bin ich, geh zur Ruhe, schließe meine Augen zu, Vater, lass die Augen dein, über meinem Bette sein. It was the same prayer my parents had always prayed with me when I was a child. It was a very moving moment for both of us. I still say this prayer every night, and sometimes I think of Eva. Especially at the beginning, I often felt overwhelmed dealing with the history of my country. It felt like I would carry it all on my shoulders, if that makes sense, also always being the only German person in the room. I remember one night at Ruthie's house, it was Shabbat and we had friends over, and they were asking me about my volunteer service and what I was doing. And by the time I started telling them about the residents, my work, I got very emotional. It all felt just too big for me. And then Ruthie came over to me and said, "It's okay," and gave me a kiss on my forehead. And in that moment, it really felt like Ruthie wanted to help me dealing with the history of my country. It was very special to me, and it felt that way throughout the entire year. It is something very different to learn about the Holocaust in school or to actually meet Holocaust survivors. It is nothing abstract anymore. It is not numbers and years. It's actual people and their stories. One afternoon, I was supposed to give a talk at New Bridge. It was Israel's Independence Day. They asked me to speak about what it meant for me, a 19-year-old German, to remember the Holocaust. Of course, I got there early and I went up to the residents sitting in the first row. I introduced myself and we started a conversation. It was an elderly married couple. Both had survived Auschwitz, as they would tell me. They showed me their numbers on their arm. I've never seen one before other than in a history book. It made me so nervous about my speech. The words I had prepared seemed so small in that moment, like there was no adequate answer to this. I did hold my speech, and after that, it felt like a miracle to me. I went back to the couple in the first row, and they were so nice to me. They thanked me for my words, but even more, they just wished me all the best for my future in a way that usually dear family members would talk to you. That day I was wearing a ring on my middle finger, and the older man said to me, "I truly hope that this ring will be moved to your ring finger one day, and you will be happily married." And I thought that really was a miracle or a moment of reconciliation, an Auschwitz survivor just wishing the best for a young German girl from the bottom of his heart. And here I am, 10 years later, visiting Ruthie and John and Margalit with my fiancé, Leonard. Yes, I was very young back then. Well, I guess I'm still not old. It was not my generation that has lived during the Holocaust, but it is my generation that has the responsibility that it will never happen again. It is our responsibility to stand up against anti-Semitism, hatred, and discrimination in Germany, but also in any other part of the world. Now that I'm coming into leadership of a Christian congregation, I ask myself, what can I contribute to this intercultural dialogue? Having had the experience of living with a Jewish family for a year, I want to encourage everyone to always be open to learn from one another. Part of my job is teaching in elementary school. 3 weeks ago, I had to teach the class about Judaism. I only had 45 minutes. So I just shared my personal story of this very special friendship with the Tepper family. I baked challah for the kids, they loved it, and we listened to the Shema Israel. The kids were so excited because it was less abstract than usual. I'm also very happy that I'm going to be part of a program that is called Meet to Respect, where imams, ministers, and rabbis come and teach together in high school about intercultural dialogue. In this very fragile world, in this very fragile time in this world, it is even more important than ever to come together and create understanding. There aren't many survivors left to share their stories. I had the incredible privilege to listen to them and to see what an impact the Holocaust had, not only to them, but also for the generations after. I carry their stories in my heart, and they serve me both as a reminder and a mission for me. Never again is now. Shabbat Shalom.